Hi guys, I just want to start this video out by saying how much I've enjoyed reading this book. It has taken me on a roller coaster of emotions, and I feel like every time I read another section of this book, I translate it a little differently. There are so many hidden meanings, whether they were planned or not, and I have loved making and watching these reading logs or discussions. Seeing everyone's perspectives has really helped me to build my own understanding of the story. And I'm super excited for this unit project. I've chosen the school teacher to be my object of choice. I feel like studying school teacher and answering all of the questions for this unit project has really helped me to make certain connections between characters or to understand why they feel the way that they do or why they're motivated. And I feel like seeing how his presence is tied into the lives of all of our main characters has really just helped me to understand the importance of learning about school teacher. Now, I could sit here and I could talk about all the reasons why I think that school teacher is the perfect choice for me for this discussion. However, I feel like this presentation can speak for itself, so let's just jump right on into this. The first thing that I want to talk about is who school teacher is. According to Morrison, he's a little man, short, always wore a collar even in the fields, and then we also know that he is Mr. Gardner's sister's husband. And after Mr. Gardner passes away, Miss Gardner calls school teacher in to help her take care of Sweet Home. And then we also know that he is a proper man, that he carries this notebook around where he writes observations and questions, and he also writes measurements that he takes of the people at Sweet Home. But these are all physical characteristics. They don't help us to fully understand the evilness that is school teacher as a person. So the next thing that I want to talk about is what he did. School teacher uses and abuses those at Sweet Home. He abuses them both mentally and physically, and of course starving them and beating them was horrendous and painful. However, I believe that the mental abuse did the most damage. He sees them as nothing more than pawns in a chess game that he calls life, and he treats them like cattle, and he sees them as worth only as much as the wealth that they can bring into him. And he is the reason for the inner turmoil that is Paul D, and he is the reason that Setha is the mother to one less child. He is motivated by greed, scientific inquiry, and by born and raised racism. He doesn't care about the people at Sweet Home. He makes his decisions based strictly on business or personal study. And when he needed money, he would just up and sell Paul D's brothers. So for my recreation, I tried to go through and take all of the research that I've done for this project, and also I went through and I highlighted every mention of school teacher to find every descriptive detail that I could to create this character. So I included his wide-brimmed hat, I included his glasses, the collar that he always wore, I included a picture of what I feel like his notebook looked like, and I tried to come up with the best answer to the questions that I didn't know. So I didn't know exactly what his skin tone was, so I went with more of a pale but also a little bit of sun color. And then for his eyes, I chose brown because when you read this book, a lot of the times these eyes are a view into the person's soul. So like you saw how damaged Setha was by the nothing they saw in her eyes. And so I didn't want to give that much depth to his character. I didn't feel like his character deserved that, so I went with a more natural, neutral color. And I'm not saying anything against brown eyes because I have brown eyes, but I felt like they were the right color to choose for him. And then I also tried to make his eyes more slanted and kind of judgmental because I feel like he was always looking around and judging something. So these are the choices that I made for my interpretation of how he would look. And please don't judge my artistic ability because I am a mediocre artist. I am not very good, but I did try my best, I promise. And the next thing that I want to talk about is school teacher and how he relates to the story in terms of meaning and purpose. I believe that school teacher is very important to study, that he is the epitome of evil, and that he represents the ignorance and racism of the time, and that he is a great example of showing how a lot of the enslaved people were treated by their owners and other captors. He is used to show the pure evilness that humans are capable of, and also the manipulation and trauma that the enslaved population had to endure. And the next thing that I want to talk about are themes. There are so many important themes that surface throughout Beloved, and a lot of these important themes do not relate as closely to school teacher as I would like, so I'm not going to discuss them in as much detail like family, motherhood, and community. I could go into further detail with them and talk about how School Teacher broke apart a family and what's the reason Setha had to make the hardest choice a mother could make, which is to kill a child. However, I want to focus on themes that are closely related to School Teacher, themes like slavery and dehumanization and past versus present and power of language. These themes relate more closely to School Teacher, and they show his actions and interactions with our main characters. The first theme that I want to break down with y'all is slavery and dehumanization. I think that School Teacher's connection to slavery is pretty straightforward. He comes in as the owner or the person in charge of Sweet Home after Mr. Gardner passes, and he comes in acting cruel from day one. On top of physical abuse, School Teacher also seeks to dehumanize them. He undoes all of the work that Mr. Gardner had done, and Mr. Gardner had treated them like men. He had let them have personalities. School Teacher treated them like animals. He wanted them to feel like animals too. He made sure that they didn't feel manly. He fed them when he felt like it, and he beat them to break them like farmers do to animals. The next thing that I want to talk about is past versus present. One of the most prominent ideas in Beloved is running from one's past. Almost every main character is avoiding something. Either they are feeling guilty about something, or they have been hurt or saddened by something. They might also, like Setha said, be living through the past and present at the same time. She says that the past never goes away. It just continues to happen on a different plane that we sometimes get to interact with. All of our characters are so traumatized by their past that their present becomes haunted with that trauma. Most of this trauma is a result of School Teacher. Probably the biggest example of this is when School Teacher shows up to recapture Setha and her children, and to keep her kids from living the same hell that Setha had suffered for so many years, Setha makes the impossible choice to kill her child. She would rather lose a child and rot in jail than return to him. The guilt of her choices, though, manifests into Beloved's ghost that haunts Setha and her family. And I think that shows the power behind this trauma, that it not only affected Setha, but it also manifested itself into a physical entity that could affect Setha, her family, the house, and the community. The final theme that I want to talk about or discuss is power of language. They say themselves that School Teacher taught them things that they could never teach themselves. He worked to completely rewire their brains and make them question their own worth, manhood, and humanity. And even Paul D starts to question what a word means and why it means that. He realizes that he is only a man because Mr. and Mrs. Gardner had called him one, and he realizes that he is only what the white man says he is. For the historical context of this, School Teacher does a great job of teaching us a multitude of things that we learned in our pre-reading. And the two best examples of this that I could find were the bit that gets put in Paul D's mouth, and then also the comparison between School Teacher and Dr. Morton. They both measured the enslaved and dehumanized them to ease their own guilt or to justify their actions. And then for the cultural context, I feel like School Teacher's best contribution is his representation of other slave owners. He gives us an insight into the everyday horrors that the enslaved people had to deal with. And then lastly, the legacy of the 60 million or more that Morrison says this book is dedicated to. I feel like Setha facing School Teacher represents acknowledgement, support for, and closure given to the 60 million or more. And in the book and in real life, one cannot change their past by confronting it, but confronting it can help ease the haunting and help one move forward with their lives. So that's all I have today, and I'm trying to keep it under the 10-minute limit, so I won't keep y'all too much longer, but I do want to finish by saying that I really loved this book. I felt like it had so much going on, but it all was necessary, and I feel like it is such a fantastic way to help those of us that have not experienced trauma like this to understand fully what this trauma does to a person and how it can affect someone so many years in the future. And I feel like studying School Teacher helps you understand the evil behind slavery and how all of these people treated all of these people. And they didn't want to look at them like they were people because then they couldn't do the things that they do. And so I feel like School Teacher is one of the most important things to study to understand the depth of this book. So just thank you so much for listening. Please let me know what you think. I really look forward to hearing it, and y'all have a great day.